I have a few stories to share about when I was a teenager at boot camp, but I'll start with this one. So, my story has to do with, well, as a young teen boy, I was a little different, rebellious, you could call it. Most teenagers, when they're about 13 going on 14, usually do things that are not what I did. When I was about 13 and 9 months old, I had already joined up with the Naval Sea Cadets or Naval Cadets, and I was due to go to boot camp. But I had to be a certain age. So I had just turned 13 and 9 months, which was the minimum age you had to be able to go where I was going. To get to boot camp, I had to fly. And so what happened was I went from a naval base or army base in a location near my hometown. And in that location was a huge naval base, which no longer exists, but back then it was there. And I got on an airplane and flew down to another location, an area in the south. And in doing so, I was flying with people from all over the United States who were also coming to this boot camp. And when we landed at the airport down south, it was another military base. And from there, when we got off the plane, right there at the airport, we were all made to line up. And so all of us lined up and marched. We actually had to march to an area where they were giving people haircuts. And so the first thing you do, you line up and you go to the barber. And they take you and they take all your hair off. You saw people that had beards, they had long hair, ponytails, afros, because this was back in the early 80s. And everybody, all of a sudden, from all different walks of life, with all different hairstyles, started coming out looking very much the same, nearly bald. And the barbers sitting in those chairs, they were brutal to everybody because you felt like cattle. There were so many of us. They just got you in, got you out, and then just went for it really fast. Sort of like shearing sheep. That's the only thing I can equate it to. And after that, you go into the barracks, and everybody's just shocked. Because getting a haircut like that, for a lot of people, well, for me, it was my first time ever getting my hair cut that short, to where you're practically bald. And a lot of people had bloody marks and spots on their heads from the razors that they used, because the shearing sometimes was pretty vicious. And then from there, we had to go into the shower room. I mean, hundreds of us from all over the country. And so you had people with all different body types, whatever, and everybody had to strip down right then and there and go into the shower. And they give you a minute to lather up, go into the shower, wash yourself off as fast as you can. And then you go out, get dry, go to the mirror room, go into the bathrooms, because you had to get your uniforms. And then they give you your uniform. And I remember marching to our barracks after that. And from there, it was 2 weeks, because we weren't adults, not yet. They didn't give us the full boot camp, but it was 2 weeks, a half a month. And I remember one of the craziest things I saw during my time there. We all thought it was the end of the world, because at that time, it was the height of the Cold War. The Soviet Union and the U.S. were not having good relations at all. And from the base, one night, we saw this huge missile take off. It was so massive. It was a Triton missile, a transcontinental, capable of going thousands of miles. And the vapor trail from that, and when it launched, it was so scary because you're isolated on a base. Nobody gives you news from the outside. You're cut off. And so when we saw this massive missile launch, we thought it was the end of the world. We really did. We thought it was nuclear war, and we were all gonna die. But come to find out, pretty quickly, since we're on a military base, that it was a test. We found it was a test of an intercontinental ballistic missile. It was only a test. But that moment, when I was just a child, only 13 years old, with no warning, watching a missile launch into the sky, the sound, the fire, the power of it, left a deep impression on me. And even though it was just a test, at 13, I knew that something about the world had changed. And that was just the beginning. The first story from my time at boot camp is what I just expressed, and there's a whole lot more to tell you, and I'll be sharing those with you soon.